now.
All right, welcome back, History Buffs, episode 4. This one's going to be a little different in that we're not going to maybe go around, jump around, ask different questions, talk about specific people, places, events. This is going to be a little more open-ended, might be a little more free-flowing, could go down some rabbit holes that we just might not get out of for the whole episode, and it could spiral out of control very quickly. My hope is should be a good, interesting conversation this time on the Renaissance. So there's so many different ways to go with this, and we talked about it a little bit before. That if there's something we don't cover and you guys want to hear about it, an episode about it later on, we can definitely go back. I could see us returning to the Renaissance topic or something related to the Renaissance topic multiple times, definitely. Going forward, but the question I have, at least for this episode, is the Renaissance is a time period that kind of covers hundreds of years, depending on what you're looking at, socially, culturally, scientifically, religiously. There's so many different angles and avenues that you can kind of explore with the Renaissance. It comes out of the wake of the Black Death, the Black Plague that spread all around Europe and really all around the world. So you have just about half of Europe's population gets killed off. Even before that, you had a famine that spread around Europe that killed off 10% before the Black Death itself. So basically the Renaissance helps kind of lift Europe, build Europe up from the ashes, and really is kind of the first modern historical era. So if you're a teacher of modern world history, odds are you start or you think about modern world history with the Renaissance kind of being the phoenix rising up from the ashes of the Black Death. So again, real general question for everyone today is what was the most important result of the Renaissance historically? And I don't care which way you go with this. I don't care where you go with this. I don't care how you define historically, but what was the most important result? What was the most important thing that came from the Renaissance? Excited and fingers crossed. Let's see where this goes. So I think we'll start with the old historian Ned Snark. What do you think? What do you got?
Well, KDL, first of all, speaking on behalf of the group, thank you for giving us so much time to study, research, and really dive into this. Yeah. It's been weeks since our last broadcast.
Right.
So we're all we're going through tomes of books, just studying. So
it's been so long I forgot to introduce everyone. Of course,
that's right. That's right.
Also from London, the usual cast of characters back again. Already finished his drywall and even out of the window, so that's good to see.
Look at this. There's a door behind me.
There we go.
Good to go. Ceiling's not doing great, but
we're gonna do a GoFundMe for Austin because we've done these episodes so far apart. He's only got like 2 shirts. I think he wore them both in the last episode.
Yeah, he wore through it
on Rockefeller and the robber barons, and now the Renaissance. So
yeah.
Well, the low-hanging fruit, since I'm going first, I'll grab the easy one, and you guys can take the more complex one. Art, as we know, it never went back. It changed from that moment forward. Both sculpture and painting, whether it was frescoes or oils, colors became more natural. The human form became more recognizable. When you think of medieval art, you think of like 1 or 2 dimensional paintings. Of whether it's popes or emperors or nativity scenes, themes of Christianity. You had before that you had the mosaics of the stones, the mosaic stones of the Middle East, specifically in Iraq and Persia. But once you got to and I really can't put my finger on exactly who was the first, but the Renaissance, in my mind, the first thing that pops to mind is art, along with that sciences, but really art, meaning the painted or the sculpted art. Even architecture. So what I mean is I don't mean music and I don't mean the written word, but I'm thinking usually those 3, because from then on, it was just an evolution from that point. The question I have though is like, where did that come from? Who was the first one to actually humanize the physical form of a human being from a 1-dimensional to a 3-dimensional? Was it overnight? Was it happened upon, or was it studied for years and we just saw the end result? But art has never been the same, whether it was Michelangelo with his sculptures, or Botticelli or with their paintings, Da Vinci with all of it, including science, with sculpture and with painting as well. to me, that's the most profound, long-term, long-lasting effect. I think it was the peak. You could argue that it was one of the peak of humanity's civilized points in the art was the Renaissance art of the 15th century.
And I can actually answer that question for you, Ned, too.
Oh, cool.
Oh, okay.
Francisco Petrarch, early humanist. So what you're referring to with the paintings is paintings got more real, more human, more you could feel. You saw human emotion. You weren't looking at like an abstract thing and trying to figure out what it was. If it was I don't know, a real simple example, someone standing in the rain, that made you feel sad because you could take real human emotion in that because you could put yourself in the person's shoes. So Francisco Petrarch was an early humanist, really paved the way in terms of painting and a little sculpting too. And really guys like Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, they all kind of copied that model along with many others as well. It wasn't just those four, but so it started with that perspective of because it just came out of the Black Death. So this perspective of what it means to be human. Well, what is this even all about? We're not here just to get killed off by a disease every year. You had guys lose their whole family, watched all their children die, but they're still here. Why? Why am I still here? Why am I still alive? So that sort of realism comes directly from the Black Death, and it gets reflected in art and other forms of society.
Was he a Florentine? Was it in Florence?
Yes.
He was from Florence. So was it
pretty sure it was Florence, but he was Italian. I know he was Italian because obviously Renaissance will all start in Italy and then spread around Europe, just like the Black Death will. So I'm pretty sure it was Florence because we talk about this. You have the Medici family funding all of it,
right?
So that's where the funding starts. That's where the Renaissance really starts, is Florence. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Florence. But I know he was an Italian humanist.
Because actually, you bring up a really, really good point, KDL. Because if you think about painting immediately post Black Death, it's very dark, right? And we've all seen those pictures, and the figures are not human like, they're almost demon like, right? Even the humans are elongated, or they don't look right, and there's also these tortured souls. And I mean, you had death was literally stalking everyone. How many 50 million people were killed in the Black Death?
Yep.
And there were three waves of the plague too.
Right, and it was random. It was seemingly random too. One day someone was fine. The next day they were, on death's door. There didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. It's not like how obviously what we know today with the flus and the way disease spreads around, that sort of thing.
So I'm seeing to that the art styles of the post Black Death era was probably related to like some sort of cathartic conscious expression of it must have been horrible to have deaths on you every day, everywhere you looked, unrelentingly, young, old, everyone. So it's interesting. And I'm sorry, what was his name again? Francisco Petrarch. Petrarch. Okay. I'm gonna have to look him up. Because at some point though, you had to get past that, right? As your psychology heals, right? So I guess you're healing. And so, okay, cool. That's good to know. But I don't think since that point, we've never looked back. I mean, once you get into like the late 19th century, with Cubism and even Picasso, who was awesome, but the human form changes, right? Because of the how it's conceptualized. But at that point, for 400 years, it got better. It kept improving, but it never really went back. It kept improving on those painters, those Florentines I keep thinking of in that period during the Renaissance.
Yep.
And sculptor as well.
Yep. Sculpting, same thing. Yep. All right. What do you got?
The printing press.
God damn it.
He goes German.
Score.
I
hope that didn't take that one. That was fucked otherwise. No, so you've got before Gutenberg's printing press in 1440-ish.
Mm-hmm.
You had a couple options. You had like a hand press. You could have monks write. You could try to write. Good luck. Not a whole lot of people could write. But once you have movable type and like a mechanized printing press, you can print out thousands of pages a day. And that leads to, a more literate society. It allows for ideas to spread through the written word, as opposed to having monks, write down Aristotle. You can print out Aristotle and then just distribute it. So the flow of ideas speeds up. That which makes allows for more, I guess, like advancement, like the arts, the humanities, sciences, business. You have more mechanized. Like as long as you have like a more, they'll figure out which kind of business, what kind of mathematical equations work, and like banking and stuff like that. Write it down, disperse it, so everyone gets on the same page. And also, it's the rise of like vernacular. So when you start printing you start getting rid of like Latin in the Bible, like Luther did the German Bible. You start to solidify your vernacular, and once you solidify your vernacular, like it's consistent all the way through, you start to develop your own national language that leads to nationality, that leads to nation states. So I think that the printing press had the most like, I'd say I'm going to stick with the most important part of the Renaissance was the development of the mechanized printing press.
And take it from a more human level too. Even there was, you said you had monks copying down Aristotle. That was literally monks. That was their job. Just copy down.
Oh yeah, they'd spend their lives doing it.
Yep. That was their job for life. And you had a real privileged few who could read and write.
Correct.
Because people didn't have to read and write because there was nothing to read. All the stuff where all the readings, texts essentially were in monasteries. It was a very, very small percent of the population that could actually read and write. The printing press obviously really made it so everyone could read and write. Everyone eventually, or the vast majority of people will learn how to read and write because everything's so much more accessible. Like you touched on the knowledge, and obviously that spreads information and helps societies, cultures grow. All that stuff you touched on. But I mean, from a real human level, it essentially makes it possible for more than a very small minority of the population to be able to do something we all consider today to be pretty basic, human function.
Yeah. And also the way I think of it is, if you go back like to the 70s and you got to try to look something up in the encyclopedia, it's like going on the internet right now. Like that's the difference between having to go to like a monastery, having to learn Latin, and having to like read very, very selected works that are available. So now you can just get it in an instant. Like I think it's that kind of change, like that, that it allows for your entire, all of Europe to just, go in a whole nother level intellectually.
Well, the other thing too is it undermined it took a while for it to happen, but it began to undermine the power of the nobility and the kings and absolute monarchs, where their idea is keep the peasants ignorant.
In the church,
just keep. Yep. Keep them going to mass. Keep going to mass. Keep them. Don't expose them to new ideas. So this was a way to circumvent that. Now, but our idea, because we all know about Gutenberg's Bible and the printing press. But was he funded, or did he just do it? How did he do it? Do you know? Do you know the backstory?
I'm not terribly positive, to be perfectly honest with you. I know he was like a goldsmith.
Look it up. He was?
Maybe KDL might be a little late. That's on Gutenberg.
So
Johannes Gutenberg.
Yeah, I know he invented the printing press. It was right around 1450 on the dot, but right at very, very mid 1400s, and it was.
Okay, we can Wikipedia that. Okay.
Okay. What's the question? What are you trying to find out?
Did he make it up his own, or
yes, he invented the printing press.
So he figured it out himself. He figured out a way.
So it wasn't like I know there was like hand ones, but I thought he just mechanized it.
Right.
Yes. So it was he basically streamlined what was already out there, and what was already out there was the setup time was essentially negligible to just handwriting down a page. So instead of setting it up in terms of the printing press, having to do it over and over again, took about the same time as just handwriting down a page. Whereas Gutenberg figured out a way to get like a mold of the actual text, and then be able to press it down, put on a new page, press it down again, over and over again. Because it was almost like think of it like a single-use printing press versus one that you can use over and over again. That was basically the change that he made.
And we could all look this up too, because this actually will be fun to look over tonight. But what kind of ink did he use? I mean, did he just use the same standard ink that the monks were using dipping their quills? Because that must have been expensive too. And then how do they apply it? Does, like, you've seen the old timey movies, right? They do the newspapers when they're rolling it out, they're rolling the ink over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wonder if that's how I'd be really fascinated to see how he did that.
I feel like there's not a whole lot of photographs of it.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Da Vinci was painting it though, RA. So
Oh, there you go.
So then, who's more important, Gutenberg or Da Vinci?
Right. Gutenberg. Absolutely.
But that's a really good point, though. That's a good one.
No, I'm pumped you didn't take that.
I was planning on it.
Yeah,
I was very excited. Yes.
Awesome. What do you got?
So for me, I think it's like the resurgence of science and engineering. So back like
Box into the corner.
So
yep.
At the height of the Roman Empire, I mean, their engineers were light years ahead of where they ended up being during the Middle Ages. I mean, they built these aqueducts that were going, I don't know, tens of miles to mountains and getting fresh water and bringing it all the way back to Rome and supplying the entire city with fresh water. And once the fall of Rome happens, all of Europe just completely went backwards when in terms of science and engineering. I mean, they were just living in these giant brick castles, just stone. There's nothing much to it. But then when you have the Renaissance, you have this. It all like comes back, and I think like a really good example of that is the Duomo in Florence. Mm-hmm. I think it's the third or fourth largest like dome, but they had to, instead of being like a perfectly circular dome, they had to re-engineer it to be more egg-shaped so that it could be as big as it was and be able to support itself under its weight.
My favorite story from the fall of Rome is that they lost the recipe to concrete.
Oh, really? Is that true?
Lost it. They don't know how they made it. There's a reason why the Colosseum is still standing and your average Jersey barrier lasts about 20 years.
I didn't know.
There's an element. They use something in Rome. Wow. They used something, whether it was like a local sand, something like that, but they just lost it. They have no idea what happened to it. Like if you go, I was in Paris maybe 5 years ago, and they were saying that and like all the giant cathedrals like Notre Dame, like the mortar hasn't set yet. The mortar that they laid down in the 1100s has not set yet and will not set.
So why haven't they taken a sample?
Sitting and just kind of like moving very, very, very slowly.
But then why haven't they taken like a
sample? They can't identify it.
That's fascinating.
They lost the recipe for concrete.
Wow.
That's the Dark Ages for you.
Yeah.
Wow. That's insane.
Oh yeah. So engineering, yes, very important.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just a little.
Well, when they built the cathedral, they were building. The French were fantastic cathedral builders in the 11th and 12th century. And those are a lot of them are still standing. It's amazing if you ever go through the French countryside. But
Gothic style too.
The 12th Gothic cathedral.
Yeah, that was the style.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the only. They had Romanesque and they had Gothic.
Mm-hmm.
But you stand in these cathedrals and you look up and you're like, how is the thing being held up today? And then you can't believe it's been held up for 800 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little model in the back of Notre Dame that shows you how they move the blocks, and it's just a guy in a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Some poor guy just crawling up this wheel, just lifting up this, couple ton bolt, like 50 tons of just
for
stone.
Generations. I mean, it took,
Oh yeah.
Notre Dame is one example. Reims, Chartres, they took generations to build. Yeah. And also the architects were also like the wizards of their day too, right? Because they could fit the stones in, and how do they do that? No one knew how to do that. So you're absolutely right. That's a great point as well. That science and engineering took like a huge leap backwards and then came back to the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
And Da Vinci was like conceptualizing and drawing like helicopters and aircraft. Yeah.
What do you got, KDL? What do we got to pick up the scraps?
Yeah. Thanks. So I'm gonna keep it, I guess, general a little bit, but I'll give a specific example of this. To me, the biggest result of the Renaissance that we definitely still use today, we all use it, or we appreciate the person that uses it on the podcast we all listen to. The ability to question things, the ability to wonder, why is something the way that it is? Why is something a certain way? Can I change it? Does it have to be this way? Is this the best way? So, and again, you can use painting. Like Ned, you gave the example for painting. For science, you can talk about the scientific method. That's literally questioning something. You talk about the church. You had Martin Luther questioning, well, why is the Catholic Church making us pay to get into heaven? That doesn't seem right, which leads to a whole new, essentially a whole new form of Christianity, and then multiple offshoots of that afterwards.
Galileo.
Right. So,
Perfect.
so questioning will, reform the Catholic Church. It'll lead to the, the English Reformation, which eventually lead to all the different religious fighting that takes place in England. Eventually leads, the Mayflower over here, and leads to the New World as well. So the ability to question, and specifically, I guess I'd focus on the scientific method, because that is literally you start with a question, and then you work your way down and solve it. Scientific method put forward by Francis Bacon is essentially, it's the same exact one used today by scientists trying to solve or come up with a COVID vaccine. So the ability to think freely and question things, that whole questioning thing will lead to eventually the Enlightenment, and John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, and why are governments ruling us the way that they are? What's the role of government in society? So you have an era of the medieval times that's basically an era of 1,000 years of the status quo. It is what it is. This is life. Then you have the Black Death come along, and people are like, well, is this really life? That's where you get into the humanism, and then you talk about the paintings, and eventually you come up with questioning various aspects of life itself, religious, social, scientific, and that leads to I wonder if the Earth is really flat. Let's go explore. Oh, the New World.
Right.
Oh, is this the best form of government? With the social contract, what's the role of government in all our lives? All of those things come from the ability to question. And the scientific method isn't the only example of that in the Renaissance, but it's the only one that you guys haven't stolen from me, so I'm going to go with it. But yeah, I think overall, in broad terms, I think it's questioning things and just being curious as a person. I think that's something.
It is the longest lasting. You're right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, my favorite of that is when Galileo determined through mathematics, not even like full-blown science or even advanced mathematics, just through standard higher level math, that the universe doesn't revolve around the Earth. The Earth revolves around in the universe, and actually the sun is the center of our
Copernicus.
Yeah.
Not
Did I say Copernicus?
Yeah, the Copernicus.
Galileo got in trouble for it. Copernicus didn't. Galileo was until recently. Wait a minute, am I wrong on this? Was it like in the 2000s that he was
1996? He was
fully absolved.
Yes, he was no longer.
Okay, 1996.
I think it was 96. He took back his excommunication. Yes, he was welcome back into heaven.
Yeah, great. He's down here going, come on, man. I'm on the waiting list here.
Just hanging out.
Just hanging out.
Fair.
But and the fact that he was because of the question posed, even though it was backed through mathematics and science, it was dismissed as heresy. It was dismissed as the work of the devil, that it was wrong. That it couldn't. That goes against the concept of what we know, which is we are the center of the universe.
Right. Because he questioned the teachings of the Catholic Church that said the Earth was the center of the universe. Yep.
Yeah. But what's interesting though is the church. We all think of the church too as at the time before the Reformation and since as being kind of anti-intellectual or anti-knowledge. It really wasn't. It was doing the best that it could, and the brightest and best minds were people that were, a lot of them were priests or bishops that were dedicated to study and to science.
Because they had access to it,
and because correct,
study it because there wasn't a printing press.
All right, just like dunked. His balls just hit me in the forehead. Okay, we know. Okay, yeah.
I mean, if Gutenberg didn't question if there was a better way to do it than handwriting,
that's a good point. Yeah,
right.
You gotta have me there.
Yeah. God, I gotta write another one of these pamphlets by hand. Wait, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, that's one of the things that blows my mind most about that era is. So you're telling me for 1,000 years that people were just handwriting teachings that they had, from 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago. And so instead of looking for a solution of maybe let's try to not do that, instead of looking for a solution to improve your life or to make your life, your job, your task easier, we're just going to do it this way because that's what, they did before us. Like that, even that thinking today kind of blows my mind. Like, how do you not try to, I want my life to be, as easy as possible, to an extent. Obviously, I don't want to be, taking away all the time, but you look for ways to make your life easier, and that just didn't happen for 1,000 years.
Do you think it was because they were so focused on living like a godly life that they were just so focused on making sure they would get into heaven that any kind of progress like that just didn't cross their mind? They were just so focused on making sure that they did what they had to do to get into heaven. So nothing like that ever crossed their mind.
I mean, some of them maybe, but again, think about the normal, even like the everyday farmer. The farmers had the most, I guess, advancement during the medieval time, and that was really just learning that, hey, maybe we shouldn't all farm the same field every single year. Maybe we should rotate our crops around a little bit. Like that was the most advancement they had, aside from a few, farming tools, that sort of thing. But even like you touched on a little bit, the classical civilizations, like Rome had better farming tactics, equipment than the medieval period did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, well, I also think too, like if you read How the Irish Saved Civilization, it's a book. It's like probably 30 years old. And during the Dark Ages, after the fall of Rome, a lot of the knowledge and intellect were found in Irish monasteries, and they kept literacy alive. But they also they weren't so isolated that they lived. They were monks, but they didn't live monastical lives. They taught the wealthy children of the Irish kingdoms, how to read, how to write Latin, how to do figures. But it's the writing, like the Book of Kells, and there's other. Everyone thinks of the Book of Kells, but there's other books just like that where someone is handwriting the words of the gospel down, right? And then they give it off to someone else who's actually doing the decoration artwork around the edges of the pages. It takes months, years to do that, getting the right colors, getting it down right, and then making another copy, and because you're making it for someone paid them to do that, right? So some king said, I need a book of the gospels, right? And they did it, but it takes years to do. So I think part of it is they knew of no better way. Remember, mechanization. The blacksmith was the guy who worked the freaking metal. What's he going to do? He's going to make like a machine that can print. I mean, and I'm talking like in the year 1000. Maybe by the 15th century they could do that, but you're asking a lot of people who don't really possess the skill or the knowledge or the vision to pull something like that off mechanically.
Right. And that's where I think you need to give guys like Da Vinci, like Raphael, Michelangelo, and others as well. These Renaissance men. The term Renaissance man is it's basically someone who can do a lot of different things. Or
right.
I don't know, an artist who's also a great mathematician, or you wouldn't necessarily think line up in every you think you're an artist or you're an engineer or you're whatever it is. The ability to do more than one thing, or to think about things in different ways, I think kind of is a spark plug for the whole thing. Like the ability to have these Renaissance men, these thinkers, like you talk about Da Vinci, with the helicopter drawings, but he also painted the Mona Lisa.
Right.
So,
correct.
Just that ability, I think that kind of
correct.
Like is a spark plug for the whole era. It kind of starts the whole era on, well, yeah, I'm a writer, I'm a copier of texts.
Yeah.
But it can also be an engineer that kind of makes this easier for me.
Right.
I think they kind of set that precedent of, hey, it's okay to do more than one thing. Your life's not set in stone. Right.
In fact, since you brought that up too, Michelangelo, who had a love-hate relationship with Pope Julius II, not only did he paint the Sistine Chapel for him, and I think did his sculptures for his tomb, but he also did some engineering work for him while Julius was fighting other Italian
siege engines.
Yeah, he
siege engines, right?
He developed siege engines. So they all were like very well educated, and had a broad knowledge on a lot of subjects. Now today you'd call him a visionary, right?
Yep.
Richard Branson. Oh, he's a visionary. 200, 300 years ago he'd be called a Renaissance man because he knows aviation. He knows the music business. He now knows space. He's a visionary, but you wouldn't say a Renaissance man anymore, which kind of sucks. The Renaissance man's a better.
It's a cool term. I think.
A visionary sounds like, and Sir Richard Branson is more than a visionary, but to me, a visionary sounds like the guy you pay, like a consultant you pay thousands of dollars an hour for to tell you stuff that you kind of already know.
Yeah.
But Branson could be considered like a visionary. Elon Musk. I mean, things.
Yeah, that's the name I was going to say.
Right. Well, Elon Musk, I think, is fundamentally brilliant on his own. I don't think Richard Branson is like brilliant in the classical sense. He's brilliant in the visionary entrepreneurial sense, where he knows a great idea. He's come up with great ideas, but I think Elon Musk actually does these things. He is an engineer. He knows. He's unbelievable.
Well, that actually kind of leads into a good question. We can wrap up here in a minute, but I'm kind of curious. Are there any good examples of, quote unquote Renaissance men today? Like my mind goes right to Elon Musk because he has a lot of different areas, but they're all basically centered around science when you break it down. Like he's not painting the next classical work in this era either. So he's obviously brilliant, like you said. He's working on a whole bunch of different things, but is he a Renaissance man? Is there a better example? Are there any examples today?
That's a very good question.
I think we've become way too specialized in today. Like we put an emphasis on specialization and becoming the master of your craft. And I don't think a lot of people, after they master their craft, think about mastering something else because they're so focused on furthering whatever field they're already in. So I don't think we really have a true Renaissance man in the classical sense.
No,
it's definitely not encouraged anymore.
No, definitely not.
No.
I mean, like from a athletics and like youth sports, I know like I've coached baseball. I've coached my younger brother, and you have some of these parents like forcing their kids only to play baseball at like 8 years old. Like you need to focus on your sport if you want to be the best at it.
Yeah.
It's why? Like, why can't they do other things?
Right. I also think too that it's shifted. So when you think of like, say, during the Renaissance period, when you had those exceptional humans that had a broad knowledge of a lot of subjects and an in-depth knowledge, like we mentioned, I don't think you have that today for the simple reason that the art aspect of it, no matter what, pick a genre, sculpting, music, painting, writing, those somehow, and that's maybe another topic for discussion, between the Renaissance age and today, the artist has gone from being the fringe of a civilized society expressing a specific aspect of that society, whether it's pain or love or beauty or something in that regard, but they were never running that society. They'd never, go back to Greek antiquity to modern times, you don't have the artists or even the philosopher running a government, running a country, because they're too intellectual or they're too emotional, they're too left brain thinking, and they can't really execute government. Nowadays, and today, the artist is all about the art and themselves. It's more of a narcissism thing, right? So maybe you want to call Kanye West like a Renaissance man. I mean, he's in one area, which is music and entertainment. He's doing a number of things in those. But
again, to me, that's still.
But it's not.
Yeah, that's
broad, right?
Today's standard is just that. It's like, you can act and sing.
Right.
I just did a real quick Google search of examples of Renaissance men. They're Bono, Brad Pitt,
Brad Pitt,
Collins, James Franco, Ryan Gosling, Hugh Jackman, Steve Jobs, Viggo Mortensen, Justin Timberlake, and Pharrell Williams.
Those are just actors.
But
they're actors who can sing.
Yeah,
all the same industry. Like they're not
exactly
right.
You need to get out of that industry.
Yeah,
it's not even the industry. It's not even the same.
No,
not even the same. Like I guess like medium, but
yeah,
it's just it's not even the same.
Right.
Same ballpark. Yeah. So you go from like a Leonardo who did like engineering and science.
I mean, you want to think about it because we're all up in New England. You think of like a Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, right? Taught every subject at Bowdoin, and then executed the most basic military maneuver that no one else thought of, and actually stopped the Confederate from flanking the Union on the second day of Gettysburg, pretty much winning the battle, or it took another day to win the battle, but pretty much stopping the South from winning the battle.
Forced the charge on the final day, definitely.
Exactly. So, I mean, the guy was a philosophy teacher at Bowdoin, and he taught every single course, at Bowdoin, and yet, somehow remembered something that he learned regarding military tactics and pulled it off. That's a type of Renaissance man, right? Mm-hmm. But he died in what, 1900?
So were there people who just weren't given the opportunity? You think like Teddy Roosevelt,
Theodore? I was just going to say that.
Yeah, he could have been. He's a big game hunter. He's a man's man. He's a politician. He's a military guy. Yeah.
Yep. Wrote 7 books while he was president of the United States in office.
Wow.
How the hell do you do that?
I don't know.
You know why? You know he did it with a printing press.
Because of movable type. That's how he did it.
That's all it is.
All right, I think Gutenberg won. Okay, I gotta
No,
see this.
I'm pretty sure the questioning one was.
I like the science. Yeah, that's actually they're all good.
That's actually really hard to like go back on.
Because the scientific leaps too, we those are huge too.
But it only happened because someone questioned it.
Because of the question.
And I think the great part about that era is there's so much to look into. Like Ned, you didn't even get into the Medici family, and that's a whole
right banking.
But yeah,
absolutely.
There's so many different avenues to talk about with religion and science and the printing press, everything else. But they're all connected also. So we could do an episode on every single one.
Yeah, they are.
But they're all connected. They all kind of come together and can really create the first modern era that we all think about, which I think is a really cool, kind of interesting point in history for sure.
We didn't even talk about exploration.
Correct. Right.
That
exploration was my backup if someone took the printing press.
So look, he says it at 35 minutes and 45 seconds.
Yeah,
I had exploration backup.
Let us know if you want a part 2 of this. I think we could definitely dive at some point. I mean,
we didn't cover
in ones.
I mean, gunpowder preceded the Renaissance, but it was sparingly used in Asia and China, especially, but also in Europe. I mean, but it was really. I mean, we talk about how wonderful the Renaissance was in some regards, but there was also brutal warfare going on in the 15th century, especially in the Italian states around the Renaissance.
Right.
Yeah, it was the age of exploration as well. Prince Henry's School of Navigation in Portugal.
That's it.
CRA. See?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
There it is.
Yeah, then you got trade, travel.
Yep.
All the other stuff to get to. So we could definitely do a part 2 on this at some point.
We should.
I think we definitely should. I think that was a good jumping off point, and then we can get into more specific stuff. Again, if there's anything you guys want to hear us talk about specifically with this or any other topic, leave it in the comments. Shoot us a tweet. And I think that's it. I think we covered it the best we could today, and I'm sure we'll dive into it again in a future episode.
And this time we won't take 3 weeks between episodes, right?
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully people can navigate their way up to Maine without issue.
Exactly. I'm going back. I got to go back.
Navigate their way down.
Saturday. All right, heading back
Saturday.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, that'll be good.
All right, gentlemen.
I almost did it from the car.
Thanks, Ned, RA, Austin. A lot of fun.
Thanks.
We'll do it again soon.
All right. We'll talk.
Great moderation. Thanks, guys.